Hey everybody. Quick quick little live review here from the Center for Media and Design in Santa Monica, where we're about to watch some short films for a really cool undisclosed reason. But we just recently saw a screening of Gareth Edwards' The Creator.
And if that name sounds familiar, he's the director of Rogue One, Godzilla 2014, and a very good independent monster movie called Monsters.
Monsters, yeah, can't believe that was already over a decade ago that came out, and it put him on the map, and it's streaming for free actually online. If you have access to Tubi, you can see Monsters there for free, and of course, if you have Disney Plus, you can watch Rogue One, and I believe Godzilla is also readily available online. But I mentioned these
Probably
movies.
HBO Max or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned these because this movie, The Creator, is a nice kind of culmination of the style he established in those movies. That combination of hyper realistic science fiction with big images, right? Big images that are sometimes more eloquent than the script itself.
Yeah, it's such a strange watch for me because ultimately I think what this movie represents for the film industry is more important than the quality of the film. Now, this isn't a bad film. I actually think it's a very classy, kind of simple
Yeah.
story. The script is very messy in the sense that it doesn't explain the power dynamics and the rules of this dystopian future. So you'll start asking a lot of questions about how the actions of the characters impact the world at large. But this is an $80 million movie. It is produced by 20th Century Studios, which is owned by Disney. So this is no independent project. However, I think it's important that films of this scale succeed because it shows studios that they can still back directors, little brainchilds that they don't have to be masterpieces, but there's still an audience willing to see them.
Well, it's a good example of a director who started off in the indie scene. He's already tasted what it's like to have big uh, franchise titles under his name, Godzilla, Star Wars, Rogue One, and it's nice to see Edwards come back home in a way to the kind of sci-fi that established him. Monsters, if you haven't seen it, is a great allegory for example, the border crisis. It's about the arrival of extraterrestrials, and it involves their presence in Central America. And I won't spoil too much, as always, but it basically turns into a story about two Americans then having to trek across the border from Latin America into the United States. Right, so it's like the flip side of what we see all the time on the news. And he famously put the special effects for that movie together on home equipment. But now with the creator, with 80 million compared to what he did Monsters for, is gargantuan. He hasn't lost that spirit for sci-fi that's visually appealing, but at the same time, it's a commentary. It's about where are we going with AI? How will AI define our future as a species? Uh, the typical questions we get in very good sci-fi about if a machine becomes conscientious, what's its worth? What's its relationship to
Also,
us?
where our geopolitical alliances are heading, the how human arrogance and unwillingness to admit faults leads people to double down
Yeah,
and continue to act in increasingly destructive ways.
and it's mostly subtext,
Well,
which is
is it?
interesting.
I mean, I think it's sort of. I just don't think it's very deep. I don't think it's
But
even subtext in that case.
no, I think because it's mostly about the images, right?
Mm,
So
mm, mm,
a
mm.
lot of it is projected mostly through visuals. Uh, there are a few moments where the ideas of the movie are up front, but I think he's trying to say more with these gorgeous wide angle shots of Asia and
Southeast Asia,
Southeast Asia.
which let's speak
Yeah,
about, because another interesting aspect of this film is he did not shoot it on Arri Alexas and Red cameras. He shot them on like higher end Sony cameras, but stuff I believe you could buy at a good electronics shop. And with DP Greg Fraser, who did the Batman, Dune,
yeah.
um, he really makes the most of it. And yeah, those sunsets over, I assume Vietnam and Thailand are
This one is
just
it's never too
yeah.
clear, right? It's just the movie does this interesting thing where it really is more about the ideas than the plot because even the locations are kept somewhat vague. So
They just call it, what did they call it? The
Asia or something like that,
new
yeah,
Asian states,
who are essentially the AI stronghold, which is at war with just the
the
West,
West,
which is represented by
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, which was nuked, which is not a spoiler because it's in the trailers, and I'm sure most of you have seen it, but have seen the trailer. But the idea is that the West is forming this coalition against this Asian AI center. And of course, you can draw many allegories, which I don't know if Edwards considered them to even what's going on today, right? Essentially, the war in Ukraine is NATO versus Russia and its allies in the East. Uh, Again, who knows if that's what Edwards was going for? But as sci-fi, I found it just generally enjoyable as a visual uh, delight. And although the script is a bit bare bones,
Bare bones and messy.
yes, the main ideas still come across clearly, and
It's elegant. It's
yes,
classy.
the
But
soundtrack's really good. Yeah,
Hans Zimmer actually surprised. I thought it was Michael Giacchino for a minute. No, Hans Zimmer
yeah,
flexes a
good,
little
good
bit.
stuff.
But you know what's so interesting? This is the kind of film where I have such an interesting reaction to, because I don't think it will ultimately leave a lasting impact, unlike a movie like Rebel,
Right,
which
right,
I
right.
mean
Please go see
I
it. Yeah,
couldn't stop thinking about since I saw it. But also, it's one where I want to see the world fleshed out more, maybe in a graphic novel. In fact, this is the kind of movie that would have benefited from like a prequel comic explaining how the geopolitical nations and confederations and different AI, how that worked.
well, like those those good old days where Warner's would preview the release of its Matrix sequels with a short film collection like the Animatrix. Yeah, I think that actually would have fit very well with the creator because you're right. It is a very it's a very broad film in the sense that you can tell it's establishing a wider world that hasn't been properly fleshed out or explained. I wonder if that's what Edwards was even going for. He's always been a director more of grandiosity. One reason I enjoy his Godzilla is precisely because instead of just being a big roaring creature feature, he establishes scale very well and what the sensation would be of looking out an office window and seeing Godzilla walk in between skyscrapers that are just a few blocks away. So,
And what he did with, Rogue One,
yeah,
when the Death Star approaches the planet Jeddah, it's like, oh wow, this is like how
yeah,
terrifying this monstrosity would be. And here too, in the Creator, when there's an attack sequence with these big like personnel carriers, which are intimidating, or the orbital drone strikes, essentially, like you feel the impact of that.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but again, it's the, I don't know, it's just, I guess I didn't feel a strong emotional attachment to anything. I was invested but not gripped.
Yeah, like I was entertained by the movie and I was taken in by its technique. I wouldn't say I was, yeah, gripped by the film. And I don't know, maybe it's the kind of movie that benefits from a second viewing. I don't know, maybe it's one of those where if you give it another look, you might end up more absorbed by it than with the first viewing, where we're also taking in all these images for the first time, which happens with movies of this kind of texture and grandiosity. Sometimes when you see them the first time, you're really paying attention more to the aesthetic experience, and then when you see it again, maybe you get more out of the plot. I don't know. I'd
I
have to
don't
see it again.
know.
I'd have to see it
Because I
again
think
to
something like
figure it out.
Rebel that I just mentioned, like
Well,
we instantly connected. We felt very strongly about it. And yeah, I suppose maybe in another viewing with this, we might get a little more, but I don't know. It's hard to say,
yeah,
right? It's hard to
it's
say. I don't
tricky.
even know if we'll even remember it in a month. Um,
It's very tricky. And if you look at well, if you look at the filmmaking techniques, Rebel is so visceral and so direct and so passionate about what it wants to say. And of course, it's based on true events,
of
right? The
course, of
creator
course.
is the creator
No, no.
is speculative, but of course, maybe that's not a full excuse because there's plenty of science fiction that's done with full throttle passion to it. 2001, heck, even the first Star Wars. These are
Ex
movies.
Machina.
Ex Machina. These are movies. Oh well, a good comparison I would make to this movie is Annihilation, which premiered
Mm.
about 5 years ago. Stars Natalie Portman. It's by the Ex Machina director.
Actually, when did it come out? Was it 2017 or 2016?
No, 2018.
Oh,
2018.
gee. Oh, my
Anni-
conception of time.
Anni-
Jeez, man.
Annihilation. I remember it well. February 2018. And that movie, I still remember clearly. It left an imprint, and it's interesting because it's similar to the creator in that the budget isn't extravagant, but you see where every resource went in terms of the visuals, the atmosphere, the technique, the
Unlike
story.
Expendables, which I genuinely think that
Not even worth
the
mentioning.
FBI or the IRS does probably need to investigate Lionsgate because that was not $100 million, and I need to know where that money is.
Yeah, that movie was. Again, I just call it Sliced Alone versus Nintendo 64.
But no, it's true. I like
Yeah.
that point because again, and it's a very good lesson for filmmakers. Yet, yes, I know, respective to a student film, the budgets are huge, but for studio film, it's relatively
Oh,
small.
well, especially Disney scale.
But
Yeah,
the
80
polish,
million.
I mean, the effects, I never questioned like, ooh, this doesn't look good. Everything was so refined. You can tell all the love and detail. I'm sure there was a lot of practical
And it's a
elements.
believable film. It's one of those movies where you really could imagine that the year
Yes.
2074, 2095 will look like this. Although, my one critique of these movies, like The Creator, is always that they put so much imagination into the environment, but they're always holding back. And I don't know, maybe this is a pet peeve of mine, but they're always holding back on imagining what music will be like in the future.
That's such a good point. I've never thought about that.
All these movies just figure that we're still going to be listening to Deep Purple in the year 2095, which I'm sure people will still be listening to Deep Purple, but the dominant music of the time will be completely different, right?
That's so true.
The same way today, of course, I listen to Deep Purple and classic rock, but the dominant music form of our time is something else, something completely
That's
different
such
from
a good
classic rock.
point.
And I always
I've
watch these
never
movies.
ever noticed
I
that.
always watch these movies thinking, I mean, come on, I'm sure everyone in 2095 what's 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 popular is going to be something that sounds totally different from yeah, Led Zeppelin in the year
Very
20 in the
true.
year 2095. Look at how different popular music sounds today compared to 1958. It's completely
100%.
different. So that's always my pet peeve, not just with this movie, but with a lot of sci-fi, a lot of
For
sci-fi.
sure.
I always ponder that culture will just keep shifting, keeps changing, and I guess it is a bit daunting to imagine that. And they imagine audiences would be a little too freaked out if the sound is not familiar. So, something to ponder, Gareth, when you do the next one.
But yeah, I would say, look, I want to see this movie succeed. And you know what? Here's another point. You know what this movie reminds me of in terms of the reaction I had to it, but I will might pop in a Blu-ray like 2 years, 3 years down the line. Oblivion.
Oh yeah, Oblivion. Actually,
Oblivion,
yeah,
Oblivion, when I saw it, I was like, this is fine. Like it didn't blow me away, but it's a new science fiction IP, and the world, the post-apocalyptic world, is so interesting. It's beautifully shot. It has a great score by M83, but the story is like one that you've seen a million times before.
yeah. It's and another one, and this one just came to mind too. Steven Soderbergh's somewhat forgotten remake of Solaris, his interpretation of Solaris.
Mm.
Uh, and of course, because following behind Tarkovsky is no easy feat and almost impossible.
You walk in the shadow of a titan,
Of
right?
ti- but his movie is still visually interesting, even if the script isn't the most absorbing. But the tone and the technique of that movie is still
Mm.
interesting, much more interesting than its lazier, less thought out peers, right? And creators the same way. I think when you compare it to the schlock that's being dumped out there in the multiplexes right now, it's a unique film. Uh,
Also, it's not an action film, really.
yeah,
It has
exactly.
action elements, but people expecting it to just be a giant, basically Rogue One,
Yeah,
that third act of Rogue One. It's not really that either. Um, it's not just a talkie, not at all, but it's
it's in between, like in that classic
yeah.
sci-fi. Well,
You know what? You hit it on the head.
mm,
It's a classic science fiction movie for the modern age.
yes, yes.
And
Even
that's Oblivion too, by the way.
exactly, exactly. Or even Blade Runner 2049, right? It's like
Yeah.
that kind of style where uh again you're almost taken in more by the speculative ideas of it. It's fun to ponder uh if by 2095 we will actually be having lunar tourism.
Sure, exactly.
like that sort of stuff. And of course AI, how will AI develop by then, and how will it change our daily life, our daily functioning, and the overall state of the world? And yeah, so that's the creator. Premieres next Friday, and next Friday we'll be on the road to Texas, so
Exactly.
we'll be sending you some dispatches
Absolutely.
from the Lone Star State, and we're now going to jump into some short items of interest.
Indeed. And just again, check out Rebel for sure. Then, if you have some extra time and you want to support these like mid-budget movies and, to let Fox and Disney know that hey, support these directors doing these
Yeah,
interesting things, go see it. If it plays in IMAX, you will absolutely be engrossed.
that's a good point. We didn't see it in IMAX. Maybe on IMAX, the full experience is more clear, right?
But even
Like
our
people,
theater was pretty good, like great sound mixing.
oh,
But
it's
but
fantastic, yeah.
IMAX, yeah, will be another special
Because honestly,
experience for
that
sure.
happened with me with Dune,
Mm,
with Dennis Villeneuve's Dune. I Denis Villeneuve's Dune. I had an absorbing experience seeing it in IMAX, and then when I tried rewatching it at home on, because that was the golden age of
that's where I
Warner's
saw it.
releasing,
I remember.
uh, it was different. I didn't dislike the movie, but it was just a different reaction, a different experience from seeing it on an IMAX screen. That could be the case with Creator. I don't know. Maybe we'll give it an IMAX peek
But
in
support it.
Tejas. Yes,
Support for studio projects, the
yes.
creator, and for keeping the independent spirit alive. Rebel,
Rebel,
which
yes.
you'll probably hear us talk about it in
Yeah.
every single
For
podcast.
the rest of the year, because
Everything we record, it is so far my
yeah,
favorite movie of the year.
it's so good. It's so good.
And
Yeah, I would say that too. It is my favorite so far. I always, I never,
Mr. Scorsese, watch out.
yeah, that one, it's something else. And I know we have a lot more to watch throughout the year. So that's why we say for now
For now,
it's
high bar to
yeah.
clear. Mr. Balal.
And Fala,
Uh,
these guys are so good. Abi and Fala, great directors.
hey, we'd also love to chat.
Yes, yes,
We
absolutely,
have burning questions for you guys. So
because
anyway,
it's so good. It's such a good movie. You guys need to come on here and talk about it. Well, everybody, we'll exit on that note and watch out for upcoming content. We will have new episodes coming up soon, including our much promised episode on Michael Mann's Heat as part of our Chronicles of Man series. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to make those commutes or lonely days more bearable.
till next time, everyone. Peace.
Have a good one, everybody.